Hi, I've been making these chocolate chip cookies for over 20 years now, and during that time I have found some tricks and tips that have helped me find a cookie recipe that my kids just absolutely love. And I'm going to share a little bit of those tricks with you today. So first off, I get all of my equipment ready, and I couldn't bring all of my equipment out here because there's just too much, but I brought some of it. One of them The most important thing when making cookies is you need a cookie sheet. I have 4, and for me and the size of cookies that I make, these are perfect. I also absolutely find that a cooling rack is essential because when you're done with the cookies on the sheet, you need to put them on a cooling rack and let them cool, and the air goes and circulates around them, and it makes a wonderful cookie. This is my favorite scoop of all time. It's a Pampered Chef scoop. I love it because it makes all the cookies the same size. I don't know the size exactly of this one. I just know it's the small one, and I love it because it makes little bite-sized cookies. Another thing that I absolutely need when making my chocolate chip cookies is this little metal spatula. I love it because of the beveled edge. It gets right under the cookies and does a really good job of not tearing them up when I'm pulling them off the cookie sheet. So that's just some of the equipment. That you also obviously need a mixer, and you need also, I love rubber spatulas because they scrape the bowl and make sure that everything is getting mixed. You also need measuring cups, and you also need measuring spoons. But like I said, I didn't bring everything out today. So after I get all of my equipment out and ready to go, then I start to do my ingredients. And first I get my dry ingredients, and I did bring some of my dry ingredients out. And I love this bowl. You need 2 bowls when you're making cookies. I use this one. I put all the dry ingredients in it, which is the flour and the baking soda and the salt. And sometimes I put a little cinnamon in my cookies as well. And then when all those dry ingredients are in, then I mix it up with a whisk, and then that way it just sifts it together. And after I've done all the dry ingredients, then I start with the wet ingredients. And for the wet ingredients, the first thing I do is I use butter. Don't use margarine, and don't use salted butter. You need to use unsalted butter because you're going to control the salt that way. If you use salted butter, you have no control over the amount of salt that's in your cookies. So after the dry ingredients are all together and I'm creaming the butter, then I put the sugar in after a couple of minutes, and I let those cream together. And after the sugar and the butter is creamed together for a couple of minutes, then I add an egg. And some people say that they use room temperature eggs and that all of their ingredients are at room temperature. I don't find that this is necessary. For me, I just use them straight out of the refrigerator, and they make great cookies. Maybe some people find it necessary, but for me, I don't see that it's a problem, and I don't need to use them out of the room temperature. So after I have done the butter and the sugar and they're all creamed together, then I add the egg. I only add 1 egg. I think most recipes call for 2 eggs, but I only add 1 egg. And then I cream that for a few minutes until it's all nice and creamy. And obviously you're scraping down the bowl with your rubber spatula because you want to get all the sugar and the butter and the eggs mixed together. And then when all the sugar and the butter and the egg and that is creamed together, then you're going to add your vanilla. And I love to use real vanilla, not the imitation vanilla, because I just think that it tastes better and makes a better cookie in the end. So after everything is all the wet ingredients are creamed together, then you take your dry ingredients and you add those back into the mixer, and you mix those for a few minutes until it's all combined. And obviously you're going to take your rubber spatula and you're going to scrape again, and it's a really thick dough because I use 2 1/4 cups of flour, and so that makes a really thick dough. But I also find that it makes a chewier cookie, which is the kind of cookie that I love. I don't like chocolate chip cookies that are crispy and crunchy. I like them to be a little soft and chewy. So after all the ingredients are mixed together, you have the flour added to your eggs and your butter mixture, then you're going to add your chocolate chips. And this isn't actually the kind that I normally like. I don't normally like the semi-sweet, but this is what I have in my house right now. Normally I like the dark chocolate chocolate chips because I think they're a little less sweet, and anyway, that's why I like them. So after everything's added, then you add your chocolate chips and you mix those, and just until they're combined. And then this is what I do because for me, I like to clean up as I go as I'm making my chocolate chip cookies. I clean up so then that way I don't have such a big mess at the end. So the bowl that I used that had my flour and everything, all my dry ingredients in it, I transfer the now finished cookie dough into that glass bowl. And then that way I can clean up and wash my KitchenAid and get it out of the way. And when I'm done and everything's in its glass bowl, then I take my scoop. And for me, I have found that I have 2 sizes of cookie sheets, and I only brought one today, but I do 4 rows of cookies along. I do, with this scoop and this pan, I can get 4 cookies going 4 down. So I get 12 on each of these cookie sheets. And then on my other one, I get, I think, 10 on my other cookie sheet. Because that's why I love this. It's just the right size to get. And then my dough is all done, and it fits on 4 cookie sheets. And for me, that's kind of fantastic. So you need to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And I think that most recipes say to bake them for like 10 to 12 minutes, but I don't like to bake them that long because I think that they get a little too crunchy. So I take them out after about 8 to 9 minutes, and I leave them on the cookie sheet, and I let them cool a little bit on the cookie sheet, because when you take them out after about 8 minutes, they're still a little soft in the center, not totally done. And so leaving them on the cookie sheet that's still hot kind of helps finish cooking them. And then I immediately put the next tray that's already been prepared into the oven. And I let that cook for, like I said, about 8 to 9 minutes. And by the time that one is about halfway done, and then I can take the cookies off of my cookie sheet that's been sitting on the counter with my metal spatula, and I put them on the cooling rack. And after they've been on the cooling rack for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, then I put them in a covered bowl, and then I keep that on my counter, because for me, I find that a covered bowl keeps the cookies fresher and it keeps them from getting stale. But also for me, I think one of the things that is essential with my chocolate chip cookies, beyond taking them out a little bit earlier than the recipe calls for, is that they need to be eaten within like 3 days, maybe 4 at the max, because then they get a little stale and they get crunchy. And as I've mentioned, I don't like crunchy chocolate chip cookies. So that's it. That's how I make my chocolate chip cookies. It's a simple recipe, and like I said, I've been doing it for a long time, but my family absolutely loves these cookies. And I hope that helped you a little.